You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today. But before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahOF.com. And for daily updates, go to OklahomaHOF on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma. And it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. So a huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. And finally, our third sponsor is 988. The Oklahoma 988 Mental Health Lifeline. 988 is a direct 3-digit lifeline that connects you with trained behavioral health professionals that can get all Oklahomans the help that they need. Learn more by visiting 988oklahoma.com. That's 988oklahoma.com. And now, let's get into today's episode. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode down at the Oklahoma Hall of Fame today with part 3 of our 988 series, talk about mental health in Oklahoma. And if you aren't aware of it, 988 is the new mental health number, which there'll be a lot of information about that in the description. You can go check that out. But my guest today is Sheamekah Williams, who is Director of Children's Services and Interim Executive Director, which is, I mean, you running the show right now, right?
Thanks, Mike.
But thanks for coming down. Excited to dive into some of, these really important topics, around mental health, especially for young kids.
Yes.
It's heartbreaking, when you hear the stories of the young kids that are going through tough times, harming themselves. I mean, it's really, really is. And I don't have kids, and I can't imagine what it's like for mothers to go through this and fathers. But even if you don't have kids, it shouldn't be happening. And I know you've been around, I'm sure, a lot. I'm seeing a lot of bad things and heard a lot of bad things. But you're in the business of making things better. So
absolutely. Before
we get into things, I appreciate what you do. I'm sure everyone else does too. But before diving into to what you do on a daily basis, tell me about you. What's kind of like your Oklahoma story?
My Oklahoma story. Well, actually, I'm born and raised in Tulsa. Okay. But by way, I am a country girl. Yeah. Live in Okmulgee County, where I like the rural culture of living kind of, in a sense, out in the nature. I like some of the stranger things that you would probably say as an African-American woman. I like to rodeo. Yeah. I love cattle. I love horses. And so a little different for me. So rural Oklahoma girl by way of Oklahoma City Department of Mental Health, where I work every day to make a difference in the lives of children, youth, and families. Yeah.
So Okmulgee, and with the rodeo scene out there, there's a bit of a rodeo scene out there. I have friends of mine who love the rodeo photography side of things and the content side of things, and they're always kind of out there or in that area, and even kind of just anyway that sort of region. It's big, right?
Yes,
and it's not uncommon to see people kind of trotting down the road on horseback, which for me, coming from the UK, is that's America right there, right? Yeah. You don't generally see that. But
that is America. And actually, Okmulgee has one of the largest African-American rodeos in the state of Oklahoma, and even probably larger than most other states. Yeah, so it's pretty interesting.
What got you into that stuff kind of as a young age?
Well, actually, I grew up in a rodeo family. My grandfather, uncles, and cousins, they all raised livestock. And so growing up in that type of family is just one of those things you just kind of follow suit.
Yeah. Do you still have time to jump on the horse and go out now?
Absolutely not.
No, you miss it?
I'm running around the state of Oklahoma trying to save lives. So I don't have a lot of time to ride horses anymore, but I do get an opportunity to raise cattle. So I love to look out and take a look at my girls and and my boys, and I call them my kids, and so get to raise cattle. So I really enjoy that.
Yeah. So you, as for a hobby, you work a lot hard. You work really hard for a hobby too, right?
Yes. When I'm home, I work extremely hard. And now that we're in the crux of close to winter, so it's going to even be a little harder.
Oh yeah, those mornings are not fun right now.
Not at all.
No. Well, yeah, that's you're right. Like when people meet you, they probably think that that's the last thing they're going to hear you say, right?
Absolutely. That is the very last thing that they hear me say. Most people, when they meet me, they probably think I'm an urban girl.
Yeah, but in Oklahoma, then I mean, you have some great conversations with everybody when you talk about rodeo and small town rodeo stuff, and I mean, that Friday or Saturday night rodeo.
Absolutely.
I need to come out to one because I've only seen pictures and I've heard about the scene and horses, like they're beautiful, but I had a terrible experience when I was a kid. The one scared me, and I haven't been on one since. And I'm not a massive human being, but I'm a little taller than average, and I just putting me on a horse that, because of my size, is going to be a big horse, it just scares me. And my wife loves it. She'll go ride and wants to do more of that, which one day is probably going to cost me a lot of money.
Yes.
But yeah,
you should definitely come see us, Mike. I tell you what, rodeos is like Friday night football in rural Oklahoma. So most of the time when you're at a rodeo, there's a lot of community folks, friends and families, and we just have a really good time. Yeah.
So how does that then connect to your day job working for the mental, like, is it just totally separate, or I mean?
Yes, it is absolutely totally separate. Most people don't even know my real lifestyle and things that I really enjoy doing. But it's one of those things for me that, work extremely hard during the day. Like I said, really working hard to change the lives of children and families in the state of Oklahoma. But still, yet, I can depress at night being out in the rural spaces and places. And it's just, it's really not, I don't consider my home life hard. It's pretty relaxing. Yeah. Nature is pretty relaxing, so.
Yeah, it gets you out of that office mentality of making phone calls and all, and you're just out in the clear air, just you and cattle and horses, and just, it might not be just you and the animals, and you have a lot of time to think, right?
That's it.
That is one thing I do miss about home, is like just fresh air and, and I've never been a big nature person. I play golf, so fresh air on a golf course is my version of nature. But yeah, it does great things for us, doesn't it? Just to get out and, obviously sunlight does great things for us too, but just getting outside, is very important. And during, I think, being locked down or whatever the situation we've been going through the last couple of years, I think it's even more important now to just go outside and not just come home and sit on the couch and watch Netflix all afternoon and go for a walk. So,
absolutely.
So growing up, then you're in the rodeo scene and you're around agriculture a lot. Academically, what is your kind of plan at that time? Do you think I'm going to go to university? Do you have ideas to go somewhere else, or do you want to stay in agriculture?
Well, I mean, growing up, I actually was born and raised in Tulsa, but my grandparents always lived in the country. That's kind of in the country. That's kind of where my agriculture nature came from. And I remember as a kid always the desire. I mean, I love going to the country. I love going to Grandma and Grandpa's house in the summertime. And so that's kind of how I navigated towards the country. But growing up in Tulsa, I actually grew up in North Tulsa, and I went to the Tulsa Community College and then Northeastern State University, and then I graduated from the University of Oklahoma. In my early 20s, I started my career at Tulsa Housing Authority, where I worked in residential services with people who lived in public housing. And I think that's where I first got my love for service. And being a person of faith, I always believe that it's a gift in the sense that I can do thus said the Lord, but get paid for it in the same sense. And so it's always been a gift that I've always adored. And I always believe that if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. So that's kind of how I got there. Yeah. And was fortunate from Tulsa Community College to follow the human services path, which led me to the University of Oklahoma with a degree in social work.
Okay. Yeah. That's I love like asking that question, right? Because you get to kind of see how someone's weaved in, and I'm sure there's experiences along the way that help you nudge you in a certain direction.
Absolutely.
You meet people and you change that. You might not think that you're changing someone's life, or you're just doing your job, but then you get that response from them, and they it really means a lot when someone says to you how much you mean to them, right?
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you've had plenty of those experiences now, but as a young adult, it's impactful, right? You think, wow, like I am making a difference.
Right.
And, you know, it's...
And I think those types of experiences, as you mentioned, I mean, oftentimes throughout my life, I would see people in Walmart or stores, and they would call my name, Miss Sheamekah. That's who I was known, Miss Sheamekah. And I'm looking like, okay, who is that? And they would tell me, you may not remember, but you really changed my life, or you did this for me and it helped, or I was on this path and I was able to get sober. And so I think those types of experiences really have changed me over time to a point where I am where I am today.
Yeah. So how long have you been in the role you're in today then? How long, I guess, so how long have you been around the mental health space of the kids side of things?
So for the kids side of things, I've been a total of 18 years. Okay. I started my career 3 years prior to coming to the state of Oklahoma and being the director of children's services. I've been with the state 15 years, but prior to that, I was 3 years at a local community mental health center out in Okmulgee County. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I've been with the Department of Mental Health for 15 years, and so a total combined about 18 years.
Yeah. And it seems to be going through a really good change, or,
Absolutely.
you know, right now it seems to be, you know, this number thing is what most people are seeing, right? They, you know, taking away from that really long 1-800 number to 988, which is obviously a no-brainer. It makes all the sense in the world. But obviously you've been there in such a long time that you've seen the process, the systems change in a way for the better. And then, you know, it's all down to funding too, right? You know,
Absolutely.
you got to get the funding for it before, you know, if you work for the state, you understand that, right?
Yes.
But yeah, I'm just interested to know kind of like the path of that and you know, what's led you to where you are today and the impact that you've had. I'm sure it's super fascinating.
Well, it has been fascinating. I think, you know, thinking back over the 15 years, really looking at the growth that has taken place with the Department of Mental Health has been extremely huge. I think that the fact that now we're in a position here in the state of Oklahoma where anyone that's dealing with a psychiatric emergency or in a situation where they need help now can call one number, one line, 3 digits, 988. And I hope people remember that number, because anytime you're in a situation where you want help for a loved one, a friend, or family, to be able to call that number and get help immediately is critical. And so I, you know, when I think back over the years, I came into the system, and of course, you know, when I started, I was a therapeutic foster mom, really working, really living my life in a way where I was giving back to kids who didn't have parents at the time. So I came in the system as a therapeutic foster mom, and definitely a challenge. So I can understand parents today, or foster parents today, who are dealing with kids who have problematic behaviors. And so as a foster parent, coming into the system and looking at the system from the lens of a parent was really important for me, and has been extremely important as my career, because I've really worked to build a system for children, youth, and families, for parents, for caregivers, so that, you know, parents and caregivers can get the help that they need, and get the help that they need now. And I think, you know, thinking back in our design is kind of like, you know, as a parent, if I wanted help now and I needed a medical help, I can go to an emergency room and feel like I can get the help that I want. And so I wanted a system where when parents had psychiatric emergencies for their kids, they can get the help that they needed now. And so the department, we started our building our continuum of care, really looking at kids that were higher needs, kids that were at risk for out-of-home placement, kids that were at risk for being hospitalized. And so we built a system called a system of care in order to support those children and families anywhere in the state of Oklahoma. We started with two county sites, a rural and a metro site, really building services and supports for families that were high need. That spread like wildfire, and we were able to get support from our legislator in order to expand that statewide. So currently right now, we have a systems of care in place that provides wraparound services. And the wraparound is just like it says, they wrap services around children and families in order to support the psychiatric needs that these kids have. And so building that platform where we have the availability of these services supports statewide was extremely important. as we navigated through that, different initiatives came along, and of course, like you said, different funding, which allowed us to build additional supports like peer supports. Peer supports are services that speak to the caregiver and a parent in a way when they're going through different challenges. They have somebody who has had those types of experience and can speak to that. And I think those are extremely important because there's nothing like being in a situation where you don't have the resources, the support that you need in order to address an issue that's really going on with your young person or your child or your kid. And so building a peer support system was also extremely important. We continue to leverage different funding opportunities in order to build services for kids that were ages 0 to 5, which is our early infant mental health services. We were able to build services for kids we consider to be SED, severely emotionally disturbed. Services for kids that were 16 to 25 that were, maybe had diagnosable mental illness, that was having challenges with transitioning in life and transitioning to adulthood. We were fortunate to build services that supports not only schools, but kids that were having problems in school systems, as well as really leveraging opportunities to partner with agencies like the Office of Juvenile Affairs and the Department of the Department of Human Services. What we know is kids that are young people who are involved in both of those systems have much higher challenges than the average or the overall population. So building partnerships that created opportunities for those young people to receive services and support that they needed to meet the needs that they have. So we really worked extremely hard to build a service system here in the state of Oklahoma that would meet the needs of children, youth, and families. Yeah. And probably about 3 ago is really when we launched and when we had an opportunity to really design and develop and move forward with the implementation plan for our children's mobile response and stabilization. And so that was an extremely important partnership with other agencies, child serving agencies here in the state, to really look at what did that system need to look like for the state of Oklahoma. Ultimately, our vision was that any child in the state of Oklahoma would have access to an immediate face-to-face response from a mental health professional who was able to work with the child and the family in order to begin and move in a direction to address their behavioral health needs, to begin to dissolve or decrease the symptoms of the crisis in order to move the family in a position of stability and stabilization. So that's kind of how this all started. And so this was not something that we started a couple of years ago. This has been a journey that we've been on. And I think our vision was on the end result. We want to be able to meet the needs of Oklahomans. We want to be able to, first and foremost, a crisis system is designed to save lives. And so that was really an important part. But we needed the support system, the foundation in place to be able to do that. And so today, we're in a critical, unique, and probably the best thing that has happened in a long time is this 988. Now they don't have to remember a 1-800 number. Now it doesn't matter if your young person is living with grandma and grandpa, or if they're staying with Aunt Mary down the street, or they're way, of course it takes about 4 hours to drive across the state of Oklahoma, unlike some of these small states. But if they're in a family member's house, we will all know the number, 988. And so, we don't have to remember this long 1-800 number. So that is exciting. Yeah. That is exciting.
Well, and to that point too, with the kind of like your ties to the rural community through your grandparents and going to that, there's a lot of, I think Carrie, who was on previous podcasts, talked about it too, because she was part of the rural, and that was kind of where she did her thing, was the kind of stigma is bigger in rural communities, right? Because the towns are smaller, everyone knows everybody, you know, and you don't really want to have a wide open space in a, you know, at a strip mall or whatever that's for mental health, because everyone can see you going, everyone knows what car you drive. That is true. You know, and then people start gossiping, it gets worse, right? And that, sadly, that works against anyone. But now you can discreetly call this number, have a conversation, and then meet face to face. And also back to the kids side of things, you know, if someone's a parent, right, it's very hard if without this system in place to try and deal, you know, if you've got multiple kids and you've got a job and you might be stressed about work or whatever it is, and then you come home to a kid who you're not a professional at this thing, you don't know how to deal with this, you know, you can't just throw him some pills or here's some pills and like knock him out for a little bit. You can now like, so no doubt you've saved some marriages too.
Absolutely. Marriages, friendships, and relationships. Because I think that, you know, we hear from parents about the challenges of raising a child who has a mental illness. And so, again, we hear those stories time and time again. But to have partners out there and people out there, professionals out there that are willing to work alongside those parents and help them to gain not just the knowledge but the skills to be able to address that, and for them to know that's what we're here for. We're here to help and support them. Well,
and the other thing I just kind of came to mind too is that now that you have a legit, proper, really cool foundation and a system in place, it makes people want to come to work every day, right? Because I'm sure there's been times, you know, over the period that you've been in this area, is you might feel like you're banging your head against the wall, right? You're like, I'm working so hard, but I'm not getting through to people.
Yes.
But now, because that foundation is there, you know that every day you come to work, you're making a difference, right?
Absolutely.
And that goes such a long way through everyone in your team knows that, you know, and then you collectively work harder and you're more, you know, enthusiastic about coming to work, and you know, you get into you know, when people work for the state, they don't work at the state to be a millionaire, right? They do it to make a difference.
Absolutely.
And so when that difference is not there, then they might go do somewhere else. But I'm sure you've seen also probably, you know, employee retention has gone up as well because you guys are doing it the right way. And, you know, to be a resource to someone, especially a kid that says, hey, it doesn't matter where you are in the state, like we can have a face-to-face conversation with someone who's trained for this.
Yes. And I think that's a really important thing to mention. Most people who come to work and do this type of work, they're here because their heart is in it. These people care. These people are not necessarily, well, I guess we all have to do it because we got to pay the bills. But I think the most important thing is they care about the population. They care about the people we serve. And I think what makes the difference for those of us that work on the front line and those of us who work to help people or to make people's lives better every day, what makes a difference in this is the access. And what I mean the access is oftentimes when you're in rural spaces, when you're in communities, you don't necessarily know who to call.
Right.
And this kind of really creates an opportunity of access, because if you call this number, and say, for instance, you call this number and, you know, and you need help, because what we have to understand is what I consider to be a crisis for me as a parent may look different from parent to parent. And if I feel like I'm in crisis and I call this 988 number, I know that number will give me access to what it is that I need. Give me access to the support, the resources, the treatment provider, the trained person that's going to walk me through the process. And so for me as the director, that's a huge win for us in the state of Oklahoma, a huge win.
Well, and the other thing too is, you know, some people might, you know, if they're unaware of this foundation, unaware of this service, anytime you mention something medical, they think, oh, it's going to be expensive. Right? Like medical stuff is not cheap out here.
Right, it's not at all.
You know, it's not cheap anyway. But when you talk about the state service and, you know, it's being provided like that, you know, there's no reason not to call.
There's no reason not to call.
Just making sure that they know what that number is.
Absolutely. We won't send you a bill.
Yeah, and be there. And so for people listening then who generally, like, how does that process work? If for example, someone has, you know, a kid and they're having a bit of a, you know, not doing very well, they have a situation, you get a phone call. You go out there. What's the process of taking, you know, through that and how that works out with the families?
Yeah. So the first thing is really making a call. When a parent decides that they need help, they make the call, or a caregiver or whoever, they make the call. There's going to be a live person that comes on. This person is live, skilled, has mental health expertise to get some specific information about what's really going on. Give me an idea of what's going on. And they're going to ask questions, all right, do you want someone to come out now? Does this, would you like a face-to-face now? Would you like to set an appointment? What is your preference? And I like to it's kind of like someone to talk to from a parent's perspective. This is what I'm dealing with, and this is how I want it to be handled in a sense. Right now, I need help now. And when they say I need help now, the call attendant is putting information in our electronic data system real time for our providers. Currently, right now in the state of Oklahoma, we have approximately 24 providers statewide that cover, in some cases, multiple counties, because they have offices in different counties. And that's our true children's contracted providers throughout the state. And so what that call center does is they put real-time information in the data system. And so when they connect to the actual provider who's responsible for the response, that provider comes in real time. They do what we call the warm handoff and connect the actual caller to the actual response team and give them an opportunity to exchange information, maybe a little bit more detail. We look at information such as safety. Are there any dogs in the home? Are there any weapons? Is there things that we need to be concerned about? What is the problematic behavior? Are we looking at a suicide? So they get information from the actual call center. The person who's calling. The actual provider that's responding will have this information, and before the actual call center completely transitions that call, that asks the actual caller, is it okay if I drop? Do you have the information about the agency that's going to be responding? Is there any additional information that we need from you that will be helpful in this response? Our expectation is that our mobile response teams are face-to-face with the child and family within 1 hour. Being rural Oklahoma, sometimes it takes anywhere, it can take up to an hour. In most cases, the parents are not available at that time because what you have to understand, sometimes parents call in crisis and they're at work. And something happened the night before and they just didn't know how to handle it, but to them it is a crisis. And so oftentimes we'll do what we call deferred, where we actually will see the child and family within 24 hours. But our immediate response is to get to that child and family within 1 hour. Yeah. So the actual mental health professional goes out and meets the child and family in the home in order to begin to assess and determine what's taking place and how do we get this resolved. Ultimately, our goal is to keep the family stable at home, in the community, to the best that we can. But sometimes we know that is not at all possible, so we look for other options, such as higher levels of care and acute hospitalization, when in fact that is a need. But our ultimate goal is to really respond, to provide the assistance, and to maintain those kids and families in their home and in their community.
Yeah. Is there, with the, and I know you said, everybody's crisis is different. Mm-hmm. Are there common ones? Obviously, ones you get more than others? Yeah,
absolutely. And it's unfortunate, but suicide is very much a common one for kids. We get a number of calls where our young people are in crisis and whether they're talking about, whether they plan, or they have a desire, and that's the unfortunate thing. Yeah. The great thing about that is when, in fact, our mobile response providers are able to get to those types of calls before any type of, harm or safety issue is in place. We're able to get in quickly. We're able to diffuse. We're able to assist the young people and keep them stable in their community, or sometimes get them to higher levels where they can get the help that they need.
Yeah. Is there a main kind of cause? Is it social media based? Is it kind of schools? Like, is there? Because that's the tough thing, right? Is when all kids are getting younger and younger with access to social media and all these platforms, and as most parents, with people listening, like, there's multiple times I've just given my kid my phone to do whatever, because to keep him happy or whatever it is. Like, absolutely. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but there are, sadly, there are bad people out there, and there are people who have access, through social media to kids who are very young and very, minds are a lot more moldable when you're 7 years old than you are if you're 17, right?
Absolutely.
I'm just curious to see if that, with a rise in technology and then kids getting younger being on technology, is there a kind of correlation with that or not?
Well, Mike, that's the tough one, because we see a range of things. I mean, depending on the age group, I think that when we look at younger kids, we often see episodes of depression, maybe in some cases due to trauma, loss of a loved one, the separation or divorce. I think that as we get older into the teens, peers become a major factor. We see things like bullying, we see other things, and other things that take place. And as kids get on up into age, it's really that transition to adulthood and how, life gets a little tougher. COVID was a huge thing for our young people. We've seen an increase in calls once COVID kids started to go back to school. And the isolation of not being able to touch, hug, or connect with your friends in the same way was definitely a tough thing for some of our young people. So we definitely see a range in reference to kids 0 up to the age of 25. Yeah. But for the most part, it's just really severe areas of depression that has existed for some time. And so,
are there any kind of general action items that you kind of that are more common to tell parents and other people that, to deal with stuff like this, or is it just very case based?
When it comes to mental health, I think that oftentimes when parents start seeing their young people start to isolate, when we start seeing grades start to drop, when we see situations where their mood and their affect may be changing, oftentimes parents kind of right now, in our state, we are a big state where, legalization of marijuana is huge, and oftentimes our young people get a hold of some of those things. So when you begin to notice any changes that, maybe exist for quite some time, or say, for instance, you're aware of an experience where your kid has had a traumatic loss or been in some incident of trauma. I think that those are things to be aware of, and it's like anything else. When you're not feeling good, your throat gets a little scratchy, or you have a severe pain in your heart, you go get help. You go see your doctor, your primary care. You go, and I think it's the same for when we talk about behavioral health. We always used to say a checkup from the neck up. There's nothing wrong with reaching out and say, hey, there's something going on with my kid. I'm not quite sure what it is. And so we lean more side on the preventative side, getting in early, figuring out, and so that young person can have a much more successful outcome.
Yeah. Do you think there's some sense of kind of I think families and parents are prideful, right? They don't want to be the reason that their kid is having issues. So that, for them to get over that and make the phone call is hard to begin with.
Yes.
But you've got to tackle that. That must be.
Absolutely. That is definitely a tough. I think, as parents, we do the best that we can. And sometimes the best that we can, we all make mistakes, and we say things and do things that over time. And so what I would say to a parent, I think that we have to really we have to step aside our own personal feelings and egos about what's getting ready to take place in order to save our kids. And so we have to give more of ourselves. Maybe it means calling 988 to say, hey, I need help. We need help now. And understanding, we'll work through that with you. And we have people, we have other parents, we have family support providers that have been parents and raised kids with mental illness who can assist those types of parents in order to understand, what's, taking place and how they can support them along the way. And so I would say, make the call. We have people that can support and help you.
Yeah, and like back to more funding, you can hire more people and cover more ground, right? And get someone preaching the choir right now,
I'm preaching to the, Mike, I think that we are definitely in a good, we're in a good space, a good place in the state of Oklahoma when it comes to the implementation of this 988 crisis system. I think Oklahoma is leading the nation. I can tell you that the Children's Mobile Response and Stabilization System is known nationally for one of the best systems in the nation. And so I'm excited about that. And I again, look to the people on our front lines every day and I say thank you. But we still have a ways to go. And I think that as we continue to build out this crisis tenure. And it's unfortunate. It's going to take money.
Yeah.
It's going to take money and an investment of people's time in order to build out the right system that we need. There's other things that we're thinking about and that we're working towards in order to do that. But so, Mike, if you just happen to have some money laying around, I mean, hey, you can always pitch it our way.
Yeah. Wave that magic wand, right?
wave it.
Win that Powerball or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. But what better way to utilize funding than to save lives?
Mm-hmm. And I think everyone listening and everyone who you meet on the street knows someone who's either gone through something like that,
absolutely,
or has been, or has harmed themselves. I mean, there's my high school back home. We went through a really dark phase in my high school, and all you've got to do is Google my high school and you'll see it all, and it was terrible.
Wow.
And it came out of nowhere kind of thing, right? It happened so fast, and none of us were no one was aware of it. And this was, this is, I don't know, I'm trying to think how old I am. This is 15 years ago. But still, it's really heartbreaking when it's too late.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And the great stuff that you guys are doing is you're tackling this stuff at an infant age, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's going to be a time where someone's going to come up to you, and they're a grown man or grown woman and they have a career and they see you in wherever, and Miss Sheamekah, and they come over and they tell you, and maybe you've had this already, and they say, you not only did you save my parents' marriage, but you saved my life, and now I'm a successful this, and I've gone on to change because of what you've done. I've gone on to do better.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that's how it starts.
It really is, and that's why I say it's, for me, every call is a life or death situation. I think back when we started Align, I would do robocalls where I would call in and check to make sure there was somebody answering, and I would, do a fake scenario and then get to a point and say, hey, this is who I am. So I personally invested my time early on to do that because I wanted to make sure that if anyone called that line, they would get the type of response that they needed to get help now. And so that was important. I think that you make a really important mentioning. I think that people, when you lose a loved one, it just doesn't necessarily affect the family. There's a spiral effect. Mm-hmm. When a loved one affects the family, there's friends, there's a community, and multiple community, whether it's the faith-based community or other communities that you're connected to that have supported you. And so for us, we just don't want our communities, our people, to have those experiences of, maybe a suicide or anything, because that is definitely a tough tragedy to deal with.
Yeah, because like you said, it's not just that person that's gone, right? It's the like you said, the ripple effect of everyone around them that
absolutely
that has to deal with that, and it's awful, right? Because it's not like someone has passed, they were sick, that's just how the world works, right? It's someone who has gone through something that they didn't feel like they could talk to you about it, and that's what hurts, right?
Yes.
It's the fact that you're surrounded by amazing people. Why don't you feel like you could? That it hurts more.
Yes.
Knowing that I didn't do enough for that person to make me feel, that for me to make them feel safe to come to me to talk about something, and it's heartbreaking.
That's a very heartbreaking feeling to have, and and the questioning of yourself about how that took place or how you allowed, how did I allow it to happen? And that's a tough thing. And so, we often, again, we often tell people, like I said, when things change or the awareness or somebody's talking about it, thinking about it or contemplating, there's help. And so the quicker you can get to the 9, then you can get to the 8-8, and we can get there a little bit quicker. And so faster in order to respond. And so, we don't want that to happen.
No, of
because
course not.
it does have a rippling effect even long after the person is gone.
Yeah, and now that, like I said, now that this number is available and there's people on the other end who are waiting for you to make a phone call, right?
Yes.
It's not like every other call center
Yes.
that they're like, sorry, I'm not in your country, I can't help you. They are waiting for you.
Yes.
And how, they're sat there on purpose saying, today I'm going to change some lives and I'm waiting my phone to ring. Please ring me because I can help you.
Yes. And you won't have to get on and listen to some automated recording.
Right.
Press 1, press 7, press 9, and then still wait.
Yeah.
Our 988 call center they're pretty quick.
Yeah.
You call, they answer, and so and that's really important because oftentimes, think about how many times you've hung up on a recording because you're trying to pay a bill or you're trying to get to. It's pretty tough. So
it's the last thing people want to do is make that phone call, right?
If you're in crisis.
But like I said, if you're in crisis, then this is the easiest way for you to get help.
Yes.
It's very discreet. No one else has to know in your family. No one in your immediate circle has to know. You make that phone call, and someone can come meet you.
Absolutely.
And someone comes out. They're not going to come out, dressed like a police officer, right?
Not at all.
They're coming out in plain clothes. They might just see you having a coffee with somebody.
Yes, absolutely. Our response teams are mental health professionals who will not come out in uniform. Yeah. They'll come out in regular civilian clothes in a way where they're extending their hand to help. That's what they're trying to do.
Well, I want to thank you for everything you do. Thank you for the care that you take in and the pride you take in your job. Just by telling us that you pretend to be someone else and to make those phone calls to make sure that your team is doing the right job. That says a lot. But also, it's not like you've just kind of been doing this for 6 months. Like you spend your life doing this.
Yes. It
says a lot about who you are and the impact that you want to have. So I want to thank you for coming down. For people listening, I'll put the link, to the website. But the main thing, it's just that number,
Yes, absolutely, 988.
Yeah.
We can't say it enough. Yeah. 988. 988 save lives.
And you'll see it everywhere. It's on bus stops. It's on social media. It's so simple. It's just a number, and it's not just. Like I said, if you're a parent, don't feel bad about making this number, right?
Absolutely.
You're going to help you and your situation and the lives around you too. So I want to thank you for coming down. I really appreciate it. And I do hope that you spend more time on a horse and going to rodeos. And now that I have, your contact information, I'm gonna hit you up when these rodeos start again, because I need to come down and see this stuff.
Absolutely. So, come on down.
I will definitely do that. Well,
thank you so much.
I appreciate it. For everyone listening, I'll post the link to the website in the description, but just remember, it's just a number, 988, and we will catch you next episode. Cheers. Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at OklahomaHOF. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And finally, our third sponsor for today, the Oklahoma 988 Mental Health Lifeline. 988 is the direct 3-digit lifeline that connects you with the trained behavioral health professionals that can get all Oklahomans the help that they need. Learn more by visiting 988oklahoma.com. It's 988oklahoma.com. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.